Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 56, and it is a completely new type of episode because we have two guests on today at the same time. Never happened before here on the show, and I'm really excited. Very often we do have a guest who maybe had a co-founder or somebody who they built the company with, and we, usually obviously get just the one guest's story and point of view. Today I'm super excited because we have co-founders. And it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko. I'm former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur. I'm the founder of Laborless, which is an immigration tech platform that automates H-1B compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency for the immigration industry and also brings you this show. Our guests today are co-founders of Immigrationhelp.org. Jonathan Petz and Ben Jackson. And Immigrationhelp.org is a nonprofit online platform that helps DACA applicants effectively file, gather their information, fill out forms, and file for DACA benefits online, totally free for them, which is really incredible. And it's, a platform that has been around for a few years. And of course, with all of the conversation happening around DACA right now, hopefully will be really important in helping way more people in the future as, statuses change with DACA. So I'm excited to talk about that. I'm excited to talk about their journeys and, of course, the technology that they've built their platform on. So without further ado, Jonathan, Ben, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited for our chat, and I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thanks for having
us, Roman.
I'm going to try to balance this conversation because now there's three of us and but at least we're all facing the same direction here. Cause if we're at a pub, if you're at a bar, you're just standing along the bar and you have to yell. So I'm really excited. So I'm going to try, I want to talk to both of you, of course, and get your stories and, talk about sort of your journey way before you even started Immigrationhelp.org, way before you guys met and became co-founders. Because I think it's really interesting and fascinating to see kind of how the ideas behind all the immigration tech projects and companies and platforms came to be. I will preface this, though, by saying that the last time I hung out with you two was in Boston almost exactly 2 years ago.
Wow.
And we had a beer at a really cool co-working space. I'll never forget it because I don't really go to co-working spaces, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I just think about how at that time, no one even envisioned that something like, the COVID pandemic would have happened. So it's good to see you guys, but of course, virtually this time around.
You as well. What a difference those 2 years make, huh?
Oh my God, it's crazy. And yeah. I had a beard. I lost the beard. I don't know did you guys have facial hair, COVID beards or no, none of that?
It got messy for a while.
It's more like the COVID gut. I think we both had for a minute.
Right, exactly. All right, so you guys are co-founders. I know you have somewhat different kind of roles within the organization. So, Jonathan, I'll start with you because I think I connected with you probably first on social media, if I'm not mistaken. Although at this point, I don't remember. But you were a practicing attorney, and you had a career in BigLaw, right? So I'm curious, before you got into the legal world and eventually legal tech, and then now into the immigration space, you spent a lot of your time in. I think you went to UPenn, right? So you spent a lot of time in the Pennsylvania area. Tell me about I don't know, where did you grow up? What was it? Well, who was Jonathan Petz as a kid?
Yeah, well, I grew up in New York, so native New Yorker. I went to college and law school at Penn, and as you said, I had this very traditional big law career where I was a restructuring lawyer, and I was just grinding out hours and totally just dissatisfied and just totally bored with what I was doing. In the little time that I had, I was doing these pro bono cases, helping these low-income New Yorkers who needed legal help, and was amazed by how form-based so much of this work was. that people needed lawyers for, but the forms are written in like, hundreds of pages of dense legalese, so nobody could do it without a lawyer. And so basically I left that world of BigLaw, and for the last 5 years have been focused on this problem of how do you close the justice gap by, instead of representing people one at a time, one lawyer, one client in person, a traditional legal model, how do you use technology to create an expert system supervised by lawyers that allows people to self-serve and get the same outcomes that they could get with lawyers for straightforward cases. And that way being able to scale our impact to help thousands, ultimately millions of people that could just never afford a lawyer.
And so when you practiced, I know you started, and we'll get to more of kind of your journey. You obviously started in first bankruptcy, right? Helping people through Upsolve, which effectively is a similar concept of you can't afford a bankruptcy lawyer. You have to go through this process. It's actually not that difficult for many people who don't have a complex case, but it's difficult only because the barriers are like the language and the dozens and dozens of pages. So is that what you were practicing, bankruptcy law, or not?
Yeah, really? I was doing corporate bankruptcy,
yeah.
Working on cases like helping Kodak restructure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pro bono work that I was doing was for personal bankruptcy, these low-income New Yorkers who were, let's say, buried in $40,000 of medical debt, making $20,000 a year. And they really needed a fresh start. They needed to file for Chapter 7. But as you said, it's like 92 pages of really dense legalese with terms like unsecured non-priority debt that make it just impossible for anyone to actually fill out these forms without legal help. And so we created this platform with my co-founder Rohan, and Ben was part of our founding team that automated this process for simple bankruptcy cases, and is now used by, I think almost 8,000 low-income families have used this now to get a fresh start, erasing over $350 million in debt.
It's insane. That's insane. That's incredible. And yeah, I want to get into that because I'm really interested in sort of how one transitions from corporate to, of course, starting something like Upsolve. I want to jump back for just a moment. So you're a native New Yorker. Are you from the city? Are you from further upstate?
Upper East Side.
Nice. Okay. And I'm just curious, like, especially I love to ask this question. You've now sort of been on the kind of founding team of 2 tech companies, especially. Did you grow up around any technology or entrepreneurship, or were you just always like studious, going to go to school, become a lawyer? That's it.
Yeah, I was always studious, go to school, get good grades, become a lawyer, work at a fancy firm to make my dad proud. Right. That was very much my path.
Yeah. Oh, I think we lost Jonathan for a second there.
So my dad, Roman, was this amazing immigrant success story. Came to the U.S. from England, had no education after age 17, and ended just very hard worker, kept rising through middle management and beyond, and ended up becoming the CEO of a bank here in the U.S. And so that's sort of like, in my DNA, and like kind of why I'm so passionate about making immigration more accessible. But I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And so your dad came here as an immigrant. Did he come here as a student?
No, he basically did. He had done high school in the UK, and then
got it.
That was sort of the end of his education.
Wow, that's crazy. And so he rose through the ranks. That's a real, like, that reminds me of the play. Oh my gosh, do you know the play that I'm talking about? How to oh gosh, I can't remember.
Succeed in business without
How to succeed. Thank you. Yeah. That really reminds me of that. But that's so cool. And I can imagine how, coming from, seeing that, right. Or at least knowing it. I'm sure by the time you were born, I don't know where he was in his career, but knowing that story and watching him rise was pretty cool. So immigrant success story right at home. So I can see how this hits close to home. And I guess my last question before maybe turning over to Ben would be, okay, so your dad, your mom, I guess is from here, right? And your dad came from the UK. You kind of were, I mean, I wouldn't say that's entrepreneurial, but I think immigrants have this like grit, right? Whether it's in the corporate world or running a kind of corner store, there's still just this heads down, hard work type of thing. Did you ever have any interest in kind of starting a business, were you interested in business whatsoever? Or was it, not really part of your kind of?
It was not part of my DNA at all. Like my dad worked for the same company from age 17 to like 55. So this was like really scary. Leaving BigLaw to solve this problem that I was really, passionate about solving was like this super scary thing. And I thought it was like destined for like very quick failure. Mm-hmm. But, my co-founder Rohan at the time was like 20 years old and like fearless the way that 20-year-olds are. And so he was like, let's just start doing it. And I was like, okay, this is a terrible idea, but okay, and we did. And it was a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of like emotional, a lot of ups and downs, but it was awesome.
That's so cool. So Jonathan, I want to pause with you just for a second, and Ben, I want to bring you in, and obviously you and Jonathan met at Upsolve, but I want to take it back to, what's your kind of back, like share a little bit about your come up story, if you will, kind of where you were maybe raised and that kind of thing.
Yeah, jump into the Wayback Machine. Here we go. So I grew up in middle of nowhere, North Dakota, freezing and spending all the time that I wasn't freezing, figuring out solutions to like problems that I saw around me. I've always been fascinated with systems, especially systems that don't work, and spent most of my childhood pulling them apart and rebuilding them, like whether it was a computer or like some Lego contraption that I found somewhere. And that's always been like my core passion. And while I didn't really grow up around entrepreneurs, I think I was kind of always destined to become one. My parents used to describe me as like if you remember the cover of that Nirvana Nevermind album with the baby like chasing the dollar bill on the hook, they're like, that's you. So like absent the like child endangerment lawsuit, that's been like the descriptor for most of my journey, I think. So I went to undergrad in Chicago. So that was like my first entry into the big city. And in undergrad was around a lot more entrepreneurs, but also a lot more culture, right? Like Grand Forks, North Dakota doesn't have really much diversity at all. Chicago is one of the most diverse cities in the world. And so that kind of exposed me to this reality that like there are a lot of people out here trying to achieve the American dream in ways that I found really inspiring and also really motivating toward sort of like an entrepreneurial end. So fast forward post-college, I went and worked for a big multinational with the idea originally of kind of learning how to help people that had passions better realize those passions in the States, and really hated the large big business life, similar to Jonathan's story. It was just like, I didn't want to do these 70-hour work weeks. I didn't want to be commuting in traffic an hour and a half both directions. I wanted to do something on my own that was more in line with the business-centered or problem-solving work that I loved doing when I was younger for myself. So I decided I didn't know how to do that well enough to just branch out. So and work for a big startup in Chicago, or small startup at the time that became a huge startup in about a year. And I really got a taste and a passion for that, like, let's go create something. So after being there for about a year and a half, actually, I decided I'm ready to go do this myself. Branched out, started a company that was designed to help low-income individuals better navigate the health insurance purchasing process. Kind of teach them, this is what you're getting, this is how to get it, this is how to understand it. Built that company up, absolutely loved it. It was the most fun I think I had ever had in my life up to that point. And thought I was going to be doing that probably for the rest of my life or the foreseeable future, until it turned out that my former employer didn't like that so much. They saw it as a threat to their business, and they used their size and financial, superiority to just absolutely crush me with a frivolous lawsuit.
Wow.
And that was like my first exposure to the U.S. legal system, And I was like, wait a minute, like what happened to justice for all? Like I thought this was how this was supposed to work. And, you know, what's up with all these people that I'm seeing in Chicago who are immigrant success stories coming in and making this work? Like, why can't this work for me? And then that showed me that, oh, in actuality, like justice isn't really for all. Like justice is very often in America for people that have influence and money. Mm-hmm. So I decided I'm not cool with this, and that I wanted to spend the rest of my career for the foreseeable future building justice solutions using that same sort of systems management, systems tweaking expertise and obsession that I'd always had. Mm-hmm. So decided to go to law school with the intention initially of learning how to empower entrepreneurs who didn't have a lot of money to better protect themselves and their ideas. Went to Chicago Kent in Chicago, specifically because they have a reputation of expertise in that area. And then in being at Chicago Kent, that idea and interest in using technology to better empower people as entrepreneurs really blossomed to like sort of a more all-encompassing desire to use technology to help anybody that doesn't have access to justice. As luck would have it, happened to be really close friends with several immigrants who were dealing with some just really gnarly immigration issues. And so through that exposure, kind of got passionate about how do I create solutions in the immigration space. So that's the initial origin of this.
That's awesome. And wow, I can't believe, I mean, so how old were you? I'm curious when you were running. So I'm assuming you worked for kind of like, it was a health insurance company. And then you started your startup. How old were you when you got hit with this lawsuit or threat?
So I would have been 3 years post undergrad. So I was probably 22 at the time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, just I can't even imagine the idea of like, you're a young entrepreneur, you're excited, and then this big scary corporation serves you with a letter with a bunch of gobbledygook, scary language, and you're like, what is going on? I'm going to jail. That's it, right? Like, I mean, I can't imagine how I would deal with that. And I mean, for me, I don't know if you have lawyers in your family, but I wouldn't even know who to turn to right now. As a lawyer, I have a ton of lawyer friends, but if you don't have a lawyer in your family and you're not like, you're saying somebody with kind of money and influence, it's scary. You then have to go hire a lawyer. How do you find the right one? How much is it going to cost? Can you trust them? That's crazy. I'm curious about that moment. How did you, like, what did you do? How did you deal with it? Did you just kind of like close up shop and say, I can't?
I should have. So I ended up, so my business partner had a family lawyer who helped his dad with some like business legal issues, but he really had no idea how to defend against this type of a lawsuit at all. And the result was about 9 months of extremely expensive, like pre-litigation work that I couldn't afford and didn't understand. That basically I just got to the point of saying, I don't have the money to deal with any of this.
Wow.
Exhausted like my loan potential from families and things like that, and just decided I have to shut this down because I can't even get it to trial without the money and the know-how.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. What a wild experience.
Fun.
I could definitely see how, I mean, look, the fact that you can think about it that way, I mean, it's true. It's a learning experience for sure, right? Something that really shaped the way you view the legal system and maybe kind of obviously what you wanted to do. Cool. I want to take a very small break just to say for anybody watching or listening, if you give us a thumbs up, a clap, a heart, whatever you can, show some love. Also, if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section below. We do have a question, and also tell us who you are and where you're watching from. That's always really fun to know. We have one comment here. It's a big one. So Ben, sorry you're covered there, but from Heather.
Yeah, no worries.
It says, Heather, I filed my partner's DACA extension this year, although I'm usually working H's and L's, and I had to use the ombudsman 2 weeks ago for the EAD. Which lagged away behind the approved 821D. I think the ombudsman actually worked to send the EAD to his old photos, even though we had sent updated photos he didn't have. Got in the mail finally this week after 6 months. I worked on a DACA case in 2014 when it was extended, I think, for the first time, and nobody knew how to deal with the extension. But this sounds frustrating. I'm happy that you got it in the mail finally, though, Heather. So congrats.
Yeah, me too, Heather. So your point, Heather, highlights really the primary reason that we do this and what we see as the main mission of our organization. And that is that no matter how complicated or simple your immigration case actually is, it's almost impossible to know what you should do next at really any point in time. And there isn't a lot of consistency of information flow, even between different application sites. So one of the things that we see as our role in this market is creating clean, clear guides to these processes, and creating a space where you can go to learn what you should be doing next. So hopefully you now know what needs to happen next in your case, but if ever you don't, that's what we're here for. And we love to help with questions like that.
The other thing I would say is that you can only control so much, and USCIS can mess things up even if you've done everything absolutely perfectly. And you see that with, mistakes that they make or things they forget, or their timelines in general. Cool. Thank you, Heather, for that. So, okay, Jonathan, I want to kind of jump back to you for a moment here. So you had this, I want to go back a little bit to the point where you're practicing, you're working BigLaw. You had a clerkship, by the way, before this, right? A bankruptcy clerkship, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you got a job at a big fancy firm. You're living out the dream that you had, in mind, right?
Yeah. So I thought.
Exactly. I mean, I'm coming kind of from the same, sort of from the same point of view where I was practicing law, and I actually really liked it. I can't say it wasn't one of those things where I absolutely hated it, but I did think I realized that I wanted to start something of my own. Interestingly enough, maybe this is an aside that I should have a separate episode on. I never thought to start a law firm. Like, I had an entrepreneurial itch. I wanted to build something, and I was already a licensed lawyer. And the most logical thing was to start a law firm. And I was like, let me start something in an industry I know nothing about.
They call that an LVP, a least viable product.
Exactly. But Jonathan, for you, like you had this epiphany. I'm curious, did you have a defining moment where you're like, I'm done? Or if not, if it was just you working with Rohan, I'm curious or maybe in addition, how did you meet him, and how did you kind of come to this conclusion where you were like, I'm out of here. I'm going to start something.
I mean, the core realization that I was done was came over a period of multiple months, just grinding work out, and just putting everything I had into it, and just not getting good feedback. Like, you're not good at this job. You trained. I did, like you said, I did these fancy clerkships and fancy schools and whatever. But I was doing these Chapter 11 fee applications, for example, where putting time increments in 0.6 of an hour increments, and describing what happened. And it wasn't just writing a brief. It was writing the first 3 paragraphs of the brief, 0.6, right? It was, and so I had this realization, oh, I'm actually not going to be good at this. I'm kind of terrible at this. And then at the same time, I was lucky that I was I actually found this problem that was just I was just so passionate about solving. I didn't really know how to solve it, but it was one of the pro bono clients that I was working with. Basically, she said she had this was the client who was $40,000 in debt, $20,000 in income, had a child living in Brooklyn. She told me, she's like, if I hadn't met you, I'd still be trapped in this debt, because it cost $2,000 to hire a lawyer. And if I had $2,000, I wouldn't be filing for bankruptcy. And so that was really the moment that things shifted for me, and really made me realize that the people who need our legal system the most in the US are the ones who are least able to access it. And a lot of times that access could actually be done with technology. Not all, there's always going to be times when you need really great lawyers to handle edge cases, expert advice, writing briefs, doing litigation, all of that. You need a lawyer for, you always will. But there's so many problems like this that can be solved in a scalable way for people who can't afford lawyers with tech. And that sort of shift is sort of what sent me on this journey with Ben.
And so how were you introduced to this, the concept of tech? Like how did you, because it sounds like what you were saying was you were thinking about it, and then you were working with, or you had met Rohan, the co-founder at Upsolve. How did you guys meet, and how did that all come about? Because okay, the realization is great, but then how did you turn that realization of an idea into reality?
So I thought about this idea of basically a TurboTax for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I listened to this speech by Richard Susskind, who many of the viewers out there may know, sort of this expert on the future of law, using technology to increase access to justice. And I was like, oh, this should exist in consumer bankruptcy. There is no consumer-facing tech product to help people file for bankruptcy. And I had this idea, and I was talking with this judge who I interned for in law school, and she invited me to this pro bono bankruptcy meeting. And so I went to this lunch, and the first person who I met there, I got there like 20 minutes early. The first person I met there was this 20-year-old Indian Harvard student named Rohan. And I said, oh, hey, what brings you here? And he said, I'm building TurboTax for bankruptcy. What brings you here? And that was just like the next day we decided to start working on this together.
Wow.
And that was that.
That's incredible. And that's one of those things that you just can't predict. And this is why going to events and meeting people and just opening yourself up to like others' ideas, and also sharing your ideas is so important, because Rohan could have been like, I don't know, like he maybe if he didn't feel comfortable sharing, or because maybe he's afraid someone's going to take his idea, and then that conversation never would have happened. So I'm assuming then you kind of started on the side a little bit, and then eventually transitioned when you thought you.
No, I went all in the next day.
Wow, you're kidding.
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah.
So what did you come into work the next day and say, I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice?
Well, I had already basically, yeah. I mean, I think they kind of knew that I was my mind. Yeah, I was in the way out. Yeah, but
yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So I guess it wasn't too hard of a decision. I mean, it might have been scary, but it sounds like you thought, now I have direction post this life I don't like.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know that this new life would. I mean, I was actually pretty convinced it was a terrible idea, but I knew that it was a problem I was really passionate about. And I knew that I was not passionate about the problems that I was working on before.
And I'm just curious, on a practical level, and obviously feel free to share as much or as little as you want, but, did you feel comfortable saying, I'm going to go out and not make money, or, just like, right? Because a lot of people, I mean, I say this as somebody who had an idea, I was still practicing law. And my conception of how far my savings would go was way off. Like I was like, yeah, no problem. I'll do these freelance writing gigs. And then I just dried up, and I was like, oh crap, I don't have money. Right. So I'm curious, like, did you save up money just in case, when you wanted to, or
I did have savings, some savings, but it was super scary and stressful when I did that, because it was like, okay, I just like don't know what's going to happen now.
Yeah, and I guess hopefully the idea would be that worst case scenario, if it didn't work out, you could probably get a job again as a bankruptcy or tax lawyer or something like that, and kind of figure it out. Yeah, I say that because the viewers or listeners, many of whom might be immigration lawyers, if they have their own idea and they're practicing, right, or paralegals or whoever is in the industry, it's scary to leave that job, right? And
yeah, for sure.
And I think hearing people's stories and knowing that they were scared, and even though now it looks like it was a great idea, at the time felt like a terrible idea, knowing that that's the case is, I think, helpful, right, to push people a little bit. Cool. So Ben, I want to kind of get back to you and talk a little bit about how you also found your way to Upsolve, because that's where you guys eventually met. And then I want to, kind of get into sort of this idea of, okay, how did this morph into doing something, I suppose, philosophically similar, but in the immigration space?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your last point, I'll jump into that one real quick, but to your last point of jumping from something to entrepreneurship being scary, I kind of glossed over that earlier, but I actually, the job that I was doing with this startup was literally accidentally ended. So I was laid off and then they attempted to rehire me about 2 weeks later. And I said, foolishly at that age, I'm just going to go start my own company and make my own money with no money, and basically just worked like a full-time job driving for Uber and Lyft while trying to get this thing off the ground for about a year while being sued going through this lawsuit. So if you can survive that, you can survive anything.
Wow, that's crazy. Did you ever get Uber riders and they were like, what do you do? And you're like, well, I'm actually working on this app.
Oh, 100%. All the time. Yeah, all
awesome.
the time. Yeah.
That's
it's
awesome.
Fun, but
so
it's not a good way to meet investors. Don't try it.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a Silicon Valley almost joke.
Yeah,
a little
100%.
bit. So after you obviously, you closed the company, and how did you find your way to Upsolve?
Yep. So I mentioned that I went to law school with this idea that I was going to create some sort of a system, a TurboTax style system, to help entrepreneurs protect themselves. So early on, while I was at Kent, I was participating in this program called the Law Lab, which is kind of like an interdisciplinary thing that's designed to teach lawyers how to be technologists and better business people, essentially. And they have a sort of like a Rolodex of people that are working in legal tech. And they also put on conferences, back to our conference note. And there was a conference going on the first semester that I was there on sort of like financial technology in the law, their FinTech legal conference. And the Law Lab director sent out an email to the distro saying, hey, we're having this conference. There are a lot of technologists here. By the way, there's this guy here, Jonathan Petz, who is building TurboTax for bankruptcy. If you want to talk to him, let me know. And, as all good 1Ls who are always looking for a job from like the second they come in the door, I was like, I need a summer job. Let's go. And I saw TurboTax for bankruptcy. And I was like, I actually had to file bankruptcy by myself while I was going through this crazy lawsuit.
Wow.
And I'm interested in building a TurboTax style model similar to what they're doing for bankruptcy. I wonder if there's a connection here where there's kind of like a broader access to justice solution in this model. So I was like, sign me up, let me talk to him. And I believe, Jonathan, so I went to the conference, and similar to your discussion with Rohan, you were the first person I talked to at that conference. And I think I kind of just like ran up to you and was like, you're building this. I want to build this. Let's go. We talked for about an hour and a half. And then like the next day, he and Rohan called me and started doing interviews for the summer. And we were signed, sealed, and delivered on that first summer internship I was like 3 months into the semester. So I was pretty proud of myself.
that is a 1L success story right there.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
And so, okay. So then you had that summer internship, and then what?
Yeah. So at the time, Upsolve was basically a spreadsheet in a type form. And they were doing a really good job with a spreadsheet in a type form. But my main role while I was there was kind of like streamlining this user review process where we were getting user information, pushing it out sort of to PDF templates, and then reviewing those templates as they came back through. And initially, I was just reviewing those petitions, seeing if they were done effectively or not, and then going back and forth with users to get them corrected. And about a week or so in, that lifelong desire to fix things that didn't work well kicked in. And I was like, all right, we're going to make this better. So I put in, several 20-hour days in a row, just going hard in the paint, trying to put in these processes to say if this, then that, and create automated email responses or specific asks to go out to users in response to specific mistakes, and realized pretty quickly that the world of total possible responses and engagements with users is actually limited, and therefore lends itself really easily to automation. And spent the rest of that summer and the subsequent semester and a half working with the development team at Upsolve to take those realizations and responses and editing things that you do as sort of a paralegal and systematize them into what became the first fully automated version of Upsolve.
Wow. So you became almost like a product manager during that time.
Well, I mean, when you're at a startup, you're everything all at once. So I was a paralegal product manager / developer / whatever else.
But it's cool because as a law student, a lot of law students, I mean, I think about this myself. I was expecting to do pretty standard legal work, even if it was in a cool startup environment. You're taught to write memos, to the partner regarding this matter, so, and here you come into a startup environment and they're like, great, give us some legal help, but then also
build an app for us.
Right. Learn how to talk to developers. And, I'm assuming you had to draw out, schematics of like process flow maps, things like that. So I'm curious then, okay, you finished that out. Now, did you went back to law school after that, or were you kind of like, what was the,
Yeah. So the real like potted overview of this. So that was first semester that I met Jonathan. So summer after my first year was when I worked with Upsolve. Worked with them for about another semester and a half, and then stopped doing that work to go work for a law firm. And the law firm that I worked for was doing landlord-tenant defense, which is also very form heavy. And so I took a lot of what I'd learned working with Upsolve, and then like kind of some additional things that I'd learned about like Zapier automations and things like that to help this law firm spin up a much more automated, much more efficient version of their client intakes. And probably, I mean, I'm sure they might tell you otherwise, but I think we probably doubled or tripled our overall capacity through some of the automations that I'd set up there.
Wow.
And that same exposure was yet another realization that like this system doesn't work unless you have money. And with a little bit of guidance, you can actually save yourself a huge amount of grief. And that's kind of been like the through line. I think you heard Jonathan say it earlier, that often it doesn't take much to put you in a much better position. But absent either a tech solution or a lawyer, you can't get there. Yep. And that sort of like furthered my resolve to create these tech solutions.
That's awesome.
So I stayed with them for about a year. And then I got a phone call from Jonathan, and he said, hey, Upsolve is doing fantastically well. I really want to solve these same types of problems that we've been solving together sort of off and on a bigger scale or in another area. How do you feel about dropping out of law school to come and do that with me? And I had, for most of my law school career, realized that I hated everything about legal work and didn't want to be involved in it at all. So I knew that I wanted to finish that degree, but I also knew that the reason that I had gone to law school was to do this sort of work. And so made the decision not only to drop out of law school, but to move with Jonathan from Chicago to Boston. Wow. Not knowing anybody, and get started on what became Immigrationhelp.org.
Wow, that's crazy. How many semesters or how much time do you have left? Out of curiosity.
So I finished, actually.
Oh, you did?
The fun thing about COVID was I was able to finish remotely. So I actually finished law school this last year.
Congratulations! Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. So you finally got the JD.
I did. Yes, exactly.
That is awesome. And of course, I'm assuming you're not taking the bar.
Get out of that. Get out of my face with that. I'm not taking the bar. I think the bar is great if you want to be a lawyer, but I think a lot of people who think they want to be lawyers should go be legal technologists. And have a bigger impact.
Wow. Well, that's super cool. Jonathan, what do you remember about that phone call? Because that sounds like a really cool moment. That's a big ask of someone, right?
Yeah. I remember being really nervous to ask him and being like, I remember preparing a lot, like bullet points. Like this is why it's a great idea. We're going to change the world together for immigrants. Yeah. We're going to do something that's never been done before. And then he said yes, and it was like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Wow, that's so cool.
That's about my memory of it too.
I really, and actually, Ben, if I can ask you, what was it like when you? Because I'm assuming if you hated law school, you probably along the way at some point were thinking like, I want to drop out. But then it's like, no, well, I'm already here. Let me just finish. What was it like when you realized you now had an out that made sense? I imagine it felt great.
It's funny. Like when I say I hated law school, it was more a disgust for like how broken the process was than actually like hating the idea of being a lawyer or like what lawyers do. So the joy of like the out was more like the clarity of a career path than anything. I think it solved the problem that so many law students have, which is, do I change the world and be poor, or do I sell my soul for corporate law, or do I try to go into politics or something like that? Who don't know the answer and who spend almost all the time they should be studying for the bar worrying about that answer, and then can't figure it out even after they pass the bar. So it solved that bigger problem for me that I think all law students have, which is, here's my steps forward that are in line with my value.
Yeah, and I don't think law schools really do a good enough job of talking about alternative careers that aren't really legal at all, because then it's almost like, well, why am I here? You know, and so it's hard. They want to introduce people who were lawyers and now are publishers or writers or actors or technologists or whatever. But at the same time, I always felt if you are showing how little your degree can impact, like, it's helpful, but is it the $200,000 really worth it? You know what I mean? And like the 3 years lost and the stress. So it's really interesting. But to your point, I really actually salute your kind of self-awareness, right? And like your trust that things will, I guess, work out. And no one knew you'd be able to finish your degree at some point. So that's
exactly.
It's a win-win, frankly, right?
And it really always does. That's the beautiful thing about this type of work and the skills that it requires, is you can pretty much take it and do anything. To your point earlier about Jonathan, right? Like, there are 1,000 different types of lawyers with all sorts of different ways of making a living. Technology, if you learn how to do certain specific things, you can apply them, to working with a landlord-tenant defense firm, or working for a bankruptcy nonprofit, or starting an immigration company, and it's all the same skills. And I think, to your point, Roman, like, law schools do teach you how to think critically through problems, and it's actually not that much of a leap to take that critical thinking skill and apply it to building a creative career. You just have to start doing it.
Right. And I think because law school is so costly financially and time-wise, it's scary to kind of, that's all I'm getting out of it, critical thinking. I mean, was that really why I went to law school? But I mean, in hindsight, absolutely. Just a quick pause here. Marianne says, you guys are rock stars. I love the story.
Oh,
thanks, Marianne.
Thanks, Marianne.
That's super, super true. I appreciate that. We're getting some more comments here, but before we jump into some of these comments and questions, I want to kind of now talk about, we've now arrived at this moment where you've decided, okay, we're going to build this thing that's similar, right, in the sense that we're providing access to justice to a particular group of people, but it's around immigration. So can you walk me through a little bit? What was the original plan? I mean, was it DACA specific? I mean, was it a similar, like, let's build a workflow and an expert system?
Yeah, I mean, our mission is pretty big. It's we want to make first-class immigration help free for anyone, anywhere, and that means a couple of things to us. First, it means creating really first-class courses and content that can educate people on the immigration process, what they're eligible for, what they're not, and how to get from point A to point B in that process, and then. The second thing is creating web applications that are designed by and supervised by lawyers that people can use to complete their immigration forms and have a full application and have a very have it be very likely to be approved by the government. And so far, we started out with DACA, but that is really just sort of the beginning of this journey.
And did you start out with DACA from the very beginning? Was that sort of the plan?
We have experimented with like naturalization. We've tested out a lot of different application types because
you're back. You're back.
Okay. We've experimented with a few different types of applications in an MVP type format, but DACA is great because it's extremely form based and it's very scalable.
And it's high impact too, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Not to say that every DACA applicant needs, the help. There are a lot of DACA applicants who have wonderful jobs and the means, but, I'm assuming that the tendency is that someone who, is here under DACA status may need more support potentially.
For sure.
And ongoing support too, because as now you're renewing every year, essentially. So.
Right. Okay, cool. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about like, what's the experience maybe like for the user? I kind of want to put maybe the audience in the mindset of, okay, if I'm a DACA applicant and or a recipient and I need to apply or reapply or what have you, what is that process like with immigrationhelp.org?
Sure. Yeah. So that's my world. I think about it all the time. So basically what ends up happening is most users find us through Google. We produce a lot of keyword optimized and, as Jonathan mentioned, very helpful immigration guides that don't exist. And as a result, they rank really highly on Google, oftentimes even above USCIS. So users find us through Google with immigration questions like, how do I apply for DACA? They then will complete a simple screener that will determine whether or not they're eligible for any number of services. If they're eligible for DACA, they then go through a little bit longer online process where they answer all of the questions, branching logic validated, that they need to fill out their forms. So if the question's not relevant, they don't answer it. The question is, they do, which automatically makes it go much faster than filling out forms on their own. All of the information from that questionnaire pushes to their forms. All the forms upload to an online portal where they can, send questions back and forth to us on those things if they need any help. They can edit and update the forms in the future. They can regenerate renewals on those forms if they need to, pulling in all their previous year data. And they can get tutorials and guidance on how to file that are all kind of in one spot. That's the basic user flow. Let me know if you have any other questions on that.
I know that there's also kind of attorneys or there's some sort of support, right? Do you have a lawyer on call? Like, how does that work where someone might have a question about a form, or if something comes up that they should get, an attorney to look at? How does that work?
Yeah, so we work with immigration lawyers, and we have a full-time paralegal who is just an immigration assassin, essentially, who handles most of the preliminary work. And then we've also worked with immigration attorneys to develop content and responses to most common questions, similar to what I mentioned earlier, doing with Upsolve, that lives in a knowledge base that is able to sort of like cut off and answer most questions that typically would require a paralegal or attorney. So it's kind of a tech plus people solution to answering questions.
That's awesome. Okay. And so the idea would be that the user uploads their information, the forms are filled out, they have answered questions that may be answered along the way, and then I guess they print it and then send it out to USCIS and sort of. Now, what if they have a question along the way? I mean, is it one of those, can they just always contact someone and say, hey, what's going on? Where is it? It's been 3 months, or things like that.
Yeah. As now, they can always contact us and we help them with those things. We're currently working on a system that's essentially going to query USCIS automatically and pull in updates. So then they'll still be able to get those updates just directly in their portal.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So, but they can always just email us at help@immigrationhelp.org and we will answer.
That's great. And the organization's a nonprofit, right? And a 501c3.
Yes. Yeah.
So that means that you're obviously not charging them fees. And you guys do you fundraise? I mean, because it's very, we've had a few nonprofits on the show. Mostly, of course, the companies tend to be for profit. So how do you actually stay afloat? I mean, how does that work?
Look at that smile on Jonathan's face. He's so excited to talk about this.
So we are going to be launching basically a low bono option for middle income immigrants with when we do family based applications, citizenship, and some of the other applications. But as you said, we're a nonprofit. We're really primarily funded by philanthropy right now. So that's Harvard University, Google's foundation, the Charles Koch Institute, and a lot of sort of high net worth folks in Silicon Valley.
That's awesome. And how do you find that process? I mean, do you have to, I'm just curious because sometimes, the question around fundraising is like, especially for the immigration space, it's tough.
Yeah.
When you're talking for profit, how big is your total addressable market?
Yeah.
Here it's different because the conversation is, look, your philanthropy is going to go towards helping individuals right now, today. There's no 5-year, 10-year ROI. There is the ROI that's immediate of literally changing someone's life. I don't know, like, I guess, can you talk a little bit about how you've prepared for that, or how do you go about doing that? Or is it just that the cause speaks for itself?
Well, it is a lot of pain in figuring out what works.
Yeah.
I've lost many hairs, as you can see, and most
Not as
of
many
them
as
are,
me.
many of them came from fundraising challenges. But thankfully, gratefully, right now we're in a really good place with fundraising. And I think what has worked is being able to share a vision of not just how you're going to help a few DACA recipients right now get work permits. Like, that's great, but really, how are you going to create systemic change for immigrants? How are you going to create a system that thousands and ultimately millions of people can use to educate themselves on their legal rights and to get status if they have a simple case? And so telling that story is really, I think, the important thing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, I mean, I don't want to say it's easy to get behind, but it's, you're doing the right thing. And for better or worse, a thought that came to my mind just now was, the last administration, and frankly, this administration too, we're still seeing challenges. There hasn't been meaningful change in immigration. There's constantly border issues. It's, again, for better or worse, it is a political topic. And so for people who want to help, there's a drive, right? There's like a constant drive to do something, hopefully.
Yeah.
I got a great question here from Chase, saying, such an inspiring journey. Love hearing you guys and about how you two met and continue to confront challenges together. I'm wondering if you could touch about how you manage your relationship as founders, because it sounds like you're a great match. And Jonathan, it sounds like you had two of these like fortuitous kind of, you met someone, the first person you met is great. How do you go about the co-founder dynamic? I know that it's never perfect, and I'm sure you guys butt heads on some things, but how do you manage that as a team?
Someone was telling me recently that the key to marriage, like 99% of the key to having a good marriage is selecting correctly. And I feel like that's the same thing with having a great co-founder relationship. And I'm just super blessed, first with Rohan, and now, since 2019 with Ben. They're just like amazing people that I love spending time with and I love working with, and they have skills that I don't have. And so how do we manage that? And we have one-on-ones where we talk about like, these are the things, you did well this last week. These are the things I think you could do better. We really spend a lot of time, talking with each other about that. But really, it's just that Ben's an awesome person and I get to work with him. So that's pretty easy.
Ditto. Good to see you, by the way, Chase.
Yeah.
Always appreciate the questions. So one other thing that I'll get this a little bit more practical towards co-working management, and my dad is actually a relationship therapist. So Jonathan, I'll push back on the selecting correctly thing. The thing that makes all relationships work, I think, and especially co-founder relationships, is structure and rules and ways of dealing with challenges. And one thing that Jonathan is fantastic at and really pushed hard for us to spend a lot of time on early on was creating like a core set of cultural values that governed our organization's identity and then also our relationships as individuals, right? So I know when Jonathan and I have a challenge on something, that we've got this set of 10 principles that we're always going to stick to no matter what, and that we can call each other out on it without fear of reprisals, because those are the values we're agreeing to live and order this thing by. And it sounds formulaic, but it really works because it creates safety and security when you know that we're playing by the same rules.
I also want to comment on something, Jonathan, that you said. I was like trained in this sort of improv based executive management training.
Yeah.
And one of the ways they gave they say you should give feedback is, here's what you did well and here's what could be better. And like, that's a really smart way of saying it, because a lot of people start with, even if they start with here's what's good, they always say here's what's bad. And even just the framing is really important. So I appreciate that. And yeah, Ben, you guys make such a great point. I love that. A couple of comments here just to kind of share it. Andrew Wilson says, "What a great mission and goal. There's a huge vacuum for these types of services." So,
thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks,
And
Andrew.
always appreciate you watching. Marianne says, "If only you could modernize USCIS." I think
We're working on it.
I think a lot of people are thinking about that. Trust me.
Yeah.
And everyone's vying for that contract. So who knows? Let's see. Maybe we can all pull together our resources.
Yes.
Chase asks another question here. So actually, I'll get back to that. Well, let's address it right now. So Chase asks, how does Immigrationhelp.org view the regulatory reform happening in Arizona and Utah? And I know you guys have just a couple more minutes, so if you could share what your thoughts on it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we think those are amazing. We were so grateful for those states pushing regulatory reform. Happily for us as a nonprofit, we really don't have to rely on regulatory reform to do what we're doing. So they don't, affect us a ton, but we think they're great things.
Yeah, and we'll see if legal tech companies can then also become law firms, right? Provide legal services. That would be really huge.
Yeah,
because then you guys could become a Catholic Charities, right? You guys there's going to be that opportunity, which I think is, I guess, I don't know. As a nonprofit, does that differ? Because you're not charging for you're not legal partners, right?
We're not representing people. Yeah. So that's another reason why I think it doesn't really affect us that much. But again, I think, the Hello Divorce is an interesting self-serve app in the divorce space that I think is really, this sort of regulatory reform opens up huge opportunities for tech solutions like them to offer legal services as well.
Yeah, let's see what happens. I'm really hoping for some kind of federal movement here. So thanks, Chase, for your question. We have another question here from Andrew, and Andrew is just in my head because this is my next question, and usually my last question, because I'm really interested in sort of where is the company going, what's the vision. So what is your vision going forward? I know you said you mentioned you tried and played around with a few different visa types, but what are you guys thinking of? Do you bring some of them back? Do you continue to build the tech and expand into, I don't know, something around global? What are your thoughts on that?
I think Andrew is reading your mind is reading our minds, because Jonathan and I were literally just talking about this right before we jumped on. So we are building a full TurboTax for citizenship in the next 2 months. So we're going to have naturalization products that's essentially the same as our DACA products. We've got your screeners, you've got your questionnaires, you've got your forms, you've got your portal and help bundled into that in the next 2 months. Following that, we're going to work on TPS, or temporary protected status applications, and then additional humanitarian applications thereafter.
So the bigger vision is be able to do at least pro bono, software for T visas, for trafficking victims, U visas, crime victims, asylum, all of these areas that are really affecting the most vulnerable immigrants out there.
That's awesome. And would the idea be to leave it as a nonprofit, I guess, this whole time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to the one thing I think we missed in that, the freemium model that Jonathan mentioned earlier is going to be utilized in our family immigration areas. So in the citizenship and in the family green card applications that we're going to be building. And that is, in the long run, how we're going to likely be able to sustain some of the more expensive humanitarian work that we're doing.
Well, and here's another question on that, and maybe we'll make this the last one. Andrew says, would you ever sell the platform to attorneys, maybe as a licensing model? No.
So
you can use it if you want. It's available online. No,
that's true. Yeah.
I'll let you answer this question, Jonathan, because you have many gray hairs related to trying to do that.
Yeah, it's so hard. We did this experimented with supporting legal aid attorneys with Upsolve, and it's creating a consumer-facing product that is really easy to use and works well is really hard. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to create a product that helps lawyers do their job better. Really hard. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Trying to do them both at the same time is just a total recipe for failure. So we're going to just kind of stay in our lane and see what we can do there.
Well, you got Andrew still as a believer. So,
thank you, Andrew.
Andrew says I will
Thanks,
donate.
Andrew.
So thank you, Andrew. We appreciate your
Beautiful.
support. I know that we got to cut this off because Jonathan, you're a busy man. I want to let you go. So I just want to thank you guys both for being here and sharing your story. It's super inspirational. And I really love, like, I don't think I'll forget this moment of, like, Jonathan, you calling Ben and saying, hey, how about dropping out of law school? Like, helping me save the world. It's incredible. And you did it.
Yeah.
And it seems like you guys are doing wonderfully. And hopefully there's going to be movement in the immigration policy space. And I suppose that when it happens, if and when it happens, immigrationhelp.org will be there to support. I would ask where people can find the organization, but it's in the name, immigrationhelp.org. So appreciate you guys so much, both for being here and thank you for sharing your mission and, putting good energy out there into the world.
Thanks, Roman. Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Roman. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I hope to have you back. Let's talk once you roll everything out. We'll have you back on the show for part 2.
Beautiful.
I love that.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening and taking part in the conversation. It's really inspiring. And I got to say, I love talking to, both sort of for-profit immigration tech founders and nonprofit immigration tech founders. The ultimate goal is really always the same. It's to make the process easier and faster and more efficient and give people more knowledge and transparency. And, in my head, I'm just thinking about all the different visa categories that can be benefited by technology and how different companies are attacking specifically. We have DACA, we have O1 visas, we have different platforms attacking different problems, or, like Jonathan mentioned, Hello Divorce. It's an app just focusing on, uncontested divorces, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of really cool legal text out there. And so I'm really grateful for Ben and Jonathan for coming on and sharing. For anyone who's watching or listening, immigrationhelp.org, go check them out. If you can, whoops, that was my mic. If you can, I speak with my hands when I'm excited, so I just knocked it off my desk. Donate, share the organization, help them out. It's the least we could do to support what they're working on. And of course, as always, thank you for being here. We'll have another awesome episode next week. And in the meantime, stay safe and wear a mask if you are inside somewhere. I don't know. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Peace out.